Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my backyard and welcome back to my series on building my new trailer. If this is the first time you're here and you're looking for the other videos, there'll be a link up in the cards and down in the description to a place that contains all the videos for the series so you can easily and conveniently find them all. So last time we got this far, so we have the structure of the trailer frame complete, the main deck area as well as the tongue is roughed out and somewhat welded in place. So this time we're going to keep going. We're going to finish up the work on the tongue. We'll add some blocking here in the middle for the deck, and we'll also work on getting the hangers attached for the axles. So let's jump into it. So I think I'm going to start by cutting the blocking out of the C-channel, which I can do hopefully inside, which is going to be a nice change. Should be warm for once. So I'm going to set up the saw in the shop so I can slide this whole length of C-channel in here and cut all my blocking indoors. So some of you might be wondering about the reasoning for adding the blocking between all these cross members. So there's two reasons. First off is going to be to pick up a seam on the decking. So to get my decking out of two sheets, I'll have a central seam for one of those pieces, and that blocking there will help to support that seam. The other reason is because the things that I typically load on here are not uniformly distributed. They tend to have point loads. So if I put a log on the trailer, typically with the things I get, it's not going to be very uniform. There's not going to be a whole lot of contact surface with the bed of the trailer. It's probably going to have 2 or 3 points of contact. So it's those 2 or 3 points that are directly transferring the weight to the trailer. So having that blocking helps distribute that weight to the adjacent cross members. And you can go one step further with that if you think about more of a impact load. So if a log falls on the trailer or rolls in a way, then you have an impact point load. So the blocking will help to further distribute that load out to the adjacent cross members and just make for a generally stronger trailer. So all the blocking is installed except this last one back here. The top seam here still needs to be welded in, but I will do that in a little bit as I get into doing some other welding. The rear one I'll install as things coming off the mill. That way I can have the back end of the trailer on the mill and use the mill as reference to get that thing in there, because it does have the angled back, which has to made up with the angled back of the trailer. So I was going to jump up to the tongue and finish that out, but I think I'm going to work on the hangers right now because I can still kind of really easily grab a center line from the top of the tongue right now before I have all the other kind of stuff up there. So the hangers are going to be placed so that if there is an even loading on the trailer, a slight majority of that weight is transferred to the tongue. That way you have some tongue weight. You don't have the back end of the trailer wagging on you as you're going down the road, which is not fun. The typical ratios you'll see for this is going to be about 55 to 60% of the length deck. So from the front to the back, if you multiply that by the ratio, either 0.55 or 0.6, that's going to be the distance in front of the middle hanger, in this case because it's tandem, to the front of the trailer deck. So on my current trailer, that one is set up at a 55% ratio, which is nowhere near the balance that I need. So the thing you have to consider with this is the type of stuff you're hauling. So if you're hauling a perfectly uniform load all the time, then you can just go to 55 and be fine. In my case, if I have something that's imbalanced, like a log, which is heavier on one end than the other, then it kind of screws things up quite a bit. So on larger trailers, you'll see these at about 60%. In my case, I'm going to 64%. That's going to put the back of the trailer at the same length as I have now, from the back of the trailer to that rear hanger, and it's going to put the majority of the additional length that I've added in front of that front axle, and it's going to give me the opportunity to really dial in exactly my load to be nicely, evenly balanced, exactly where I want it. So these need to be set up so that they are perpendicular to the center line of the trailer, so that your axles end up perpendicular to that and it tows nice and smoothly. The nice thing about taking some time, making sure all of this stuff is perfect, laying out these things so that they're actually perpendicular to that center line isn't all that difficult either. So I'll have these front hangers which will connect with the wrapped tongue, and that's going to be sort of my starting point. What I really want to know is this point on the tongue the same as that point over there? And I've already measured it, and this one here is 1/8 of an inch longer, so I do need to make a slight adjustment, but luckily not a whole lot. So I'm going to have the front hanger be essentially the start position or the fixed position, and then I'll set the other hangers in relation to that one, which should be pretty straightforward and simple. The spacing on these things is 29.5 inches on center, so that isn't super difficult to kind of figure out either. The other thing I'm going to do is I have these backing plates, which I already made. So these are just some 2-inch flat bar. I tack welded them together, took them over to the drill press, and drilled a bunch of plug weld holes through them all. That made it really quick to have a whole stack of parts, which are exactly the same, and you only have to drill 4 holes as opposed to trying to drill every single part separately, which would be 4 times 6, 24 individual holes. So now these things can be cut apart, and they can be used to further reinforce that connection between this hanger and my frame. So just like if you're doing like a D-ring or something like that, where you have this point load coming into your piece of work, with a backing plate on there, that's going to help distribute the load into the beam piece, which, I mean, this tube is 1/4 inch thick, so it's probably fine, but it's not that hard to add a little plate in there to help distribute that force a little bit. Now, of course, this front one is only going to have a partial plate, so I'll cut that down to fit, but it's going to be further backed by the tongue over here. So there's going to be a lot more support up here. So first thing on the list is going to be to get the hanger tacked to its new mounting plate or backing plate. The front ones I'll trim down and remove that front plug weld hole area once those plates are tack welded to the hanger, and then I can start actually laying things out and get them tacked in place. At this point, I'm just going to keep these things tacked on for now so I can double check things once I have things a little further along. But it really shouldn't be super difficult to get all of these installed correctly once we have the actual location of the first one being perfectly square to that center line. The other ones should just fall right in line. So now with this side fixed in place, I can adjust the other side so that it ends up nice and square to the center line of the trailer. So all I have to do here is just take a measurement from the center of the tongue to the axle mounting center over there and compare the two. I've already done one measurement. This one here is 1/8 of an inch too long, which is perfect. Well, perfect because I can still scoot it this way. So I'm just gonna go back and forth here, scoot this thing forward, moving the second hanger forward with it so the spacing stays consistent. And once they get them reading the same, I can just verify that the actual axle mounting width is correct, which it looks like it should be, and then kind of tack things in place and set the rear one as well. I'm just going to verify the left to right position here. 78 1/4, that's exactly where it should be. So this front one is good right where it is now. Now for sort of my own mental check, I'm also going to use this string just to double check things. So I'm just going to pinch it right over the center of the axle mount. Keep the same amount of tension and come over this one. And they should line up perfectly, which it does. So it's another double check there. So that front hanger is ready to be tacked in place. Okay, those are good to go. Whee! So those hangers and plates are all ready to be welded on permanently. But before I do that, I'm gonna start working up here on the tongue and getting this kind of set up. Because my strategy today is to get most everything ready to go for the actual welding, so that way I don't have to like actually suit up for that once, because this jacket's pretty darn cozy today. So up here at the front of the tongue, these tubes are gonna get welded to this plate right here. But what I really want to do is have this middle area removed so I can weld from in here through both of these into the plate. So I do want to be able to cut these apart. Before I do that, these tacks here holding these things together, I want to install the cross piece in here, the brace that's going to hold the jack. It's also going to hold the front of the tongue together this way. So that's going to come out of this guy. So this needs some angles cut on it, and it needs to get installed in here at the right position. So the jack is positioned far enough back from the coupler so that when the tailgate of a truck falls down, it does not hit the jack. And while I have this tongue connecting piece in the shop, gotta get cut down to final length, I can also go over to the Bridgeport and drill the bolt hole pattern for the tongue jack, which will be mounted here as well. Of course, this is gonna be a lot easier to do that now than when this thing is installed, and I can use the Bridgeport to ensure that my hole pattern is pretty darn accurate. I want to open up this middle area so I'm able to get a weld all the way through both pieces of the tube into the plate, which is going to be over here. So in order to do that, I need this to be opened up and ready to go. So I think I'm ready to go. I'm going to grab a cutoff wheel, cut a little kerf in there, get rid of a lot of that material, and do all the weld prep around the tube, as well as prep the plate so I have a nice area there for my weld to go. Okay, so this should be ready to go on. Everything has a nice big bevel on there, so I'll have plenty of space for weld material. And one thing I'll note is that this seam here on the inside, this will be the only structural seam on this trailer that I'll be welding in a vertical position. Everything else will be horizontal. So it's really the only one that I'm super worried about, but I think it'll be all right. So I'm gonna get this thing positioned, clamped in place, and we'll get this thing tacked on here with the MIG welder. Now the next thing to go on is going to be the adjustable height coupler. So this is going to go right on here. Just got to get this thing lined up, centered. I'm also going to have a gusset plate that goes on here. So I'm going to set this thing up to be flush with the spacer here and then a line centered here. So it does have center marks on there, so it should be pretty easy to get this thing lined up. And then we'll tack this thing on, and I think that's going to be about it for things that need to get tacked on at this point before we do the actual final welding. Okay, I think everything is looking pretty darn good, so I think at this point it's time to switch from the silly wire feed to stick and finalize all of these welds. It's finally like warmed up a little bit, so I'm gonna get changed and suited up for some serious time welding. Stick, yes! Ah, Stick, I missed you so much. So much! So next up is this gusset plate, which will further connect the two halves of the tongue together and also tie in directly to the coupler mount and the joining plate here below. So I'll go ahead and prep this area, clean everything up, get it all ready to go, and get this thing welded in place. And then while I'm also all geared up for welding, I'll also install the safety chain mounts, which will go up here on the underside, connecting to each half of the tongue. So each half of the tongue is going to receive a backing plate, followed by the actual mount. And since it's going to be a lot easier to give these a little bit of shape and cleanup, once these things are welded to the frame, I'll do that afterwards with an angle grinder just to make them look a little bit nicer. A little bit easier to do that now while they're held in place with welds than trying to hold these things and shape them because they're not super big. So with the front area of the tongue all taken care of, I can spin the trailer frame around and finish up a few small things still remaining to do on the underside of this frame before we get this thing flipping around. So I still have the blocking to install between the rear of the trailer and then that first cross member. So I'll get that cut to size, get it fit in there, and get that welded in place. I also have a few welds remaining, so I'll take care of those as well. And then the last thing on the list will be to drill some drain holes into the tube so that when it's capped, there'll be somewhere for any water that gets inside these tubes to actually drain out. Nothing too crazy there, just a few holes to drill. So that's going to do it for the trailer in this position here. Next, it's time to get this thing off the saw so we can get it spinning around and get all the rest of the welds on there and get the deck on there and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and get this trailer moved off the saw and put it right here. So I partnered with Refrigerware on this video. They make some really nice cold weather gear. It might be obvious, but one thing I really enjoy is being and working outdoors. Now, living in Minnesota, that gets a little challenging in the winter, especially for me since I'm not a fan of being cold. What I am a fan of is anything that allows me to continue working outdoors without freezing to death. I'm wearing Refrigerware's negative 40°F jacket, their work boots, and gloves. It was 20 degrees out when I was moving this, and judging by how warm I was, this gear is going to be amazing once it gets really cold here over the next few months. I'm not moving this trailer very far, only about 10 feet, and I'm raising it about 40 inches off the ground, which with the small steps I'm taking is going to take a little while, but I've actually been looking forward to moving and raising this trailer for a while. There's something that I just enjoy about these tasks that require some creativity and a pretty low amount of physical input. I'm probably just happy to be out and moving around and not sitting at my desk. And for those of you wanting to keep track of the weight of this thing, at this point the trailer weighs a little over 1,100 pounds, which is something like 500 kilos. I ran out of daylight the first day, and the next day was significantly warmer, as you can see from the magical disappearance of the snow. I switched to this more fall weather jacket, and I really need to be careful because I have specific instructions from my wife, but I can't get it dirty because it's my going out jacket now. If you want to check out Refrigerware's awesome products, there'll be a link down in the description. So now we're up in the air. I think this is pretty close. Might have to go up a couple more inches. But next, I'm going to throw together a couple of quick stands to make spin this thing around super easy. At least I hope it'll be super easy. So some leftovers from when I built my sawmill already 3 years ago. I have these pieces of thick wall angle, which I use for different bracing and temporary stuff, as well as the shorter ones here, which I already cut at 45. I got some extra tube. So I should be able to whip up some pretty substantial stands out of this bit of scrap, I guess. So since these rotisserie stands are going to be pretty ridiculously overbuilt, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to practice my MIG welding skills, because I don't feel that I'm quite there yet. It's a totally different motion and way of working, so I think having some nice beads here to kind of practice on will be relatively helpful. So I just threw together a couple of mounts for this so that the trailer can pivot on the stands. So this guy down here is the size to fit right in here. I actually have to mill down this piece of tube to fit because it's a little smaller than 3 inches in here. And then I welded a piece of pipe to it. And now this thing can just mount in here with the same coupler bolts. That'd be used for actually hooking up the coupler for the actual trailer. So that's that side. The other side is an angled plate, so this just gets welded to the back of the trailer, and I'll have the same exact setup on that side. So you can see my rough height setting is a little off. This side has to come up, that side has to come down, and I gotta get all this stuff out from underneath the trailer frame so we can get this thing spinning around. So I was a little bit worried how well this is going to work out, but I mean, in theory, as long as this thing is relatively balanced on one side versus the other, it should turn fairly easily without really a whole lot of input on my parts. So I'm really looking forward to having this here because it's going to allow me to rotate and roll the entire frame into whatever welding position is most comfortable for me. And it's also going to allow me to keep flipping it over as I'm working if I need to work on the underside, or if I need to work on the top, for instance. I don't have to worry about having everything on the underside done before I flip it over, because I can always just roll it back over real easily if I forget or miss something or want to change up the design. So there's a lot more flexibility here, which is great. So that's going to do it for this one. Big thank you again to Refrigerware for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check out their full line of cold weather gear. There'll be a link to that again down in the description. So next time we're going to keep going here. I'll get this whole thing welded out. I'll add the deck and keep going from there. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the build or anything back in the shop, please feel free to leave me a comment. I'd love to be happy to answer any questions you might have. Until next time, happy working.